Professor Larry Diamond, there has been a very interesting development in this country, in Burma or Myanmar, that 2 days ago, uh, House Speaker, influential House Speaker, Thuraj Shyman, has been demoted. He's no longer chairman of the USGB, the ruling party, but still, he is a MP. Still, he's a House Speaker. But we don't know how it's going to unfold in the coming weeks because Parliament is going to start again next week. And the Western press and local press call it is internal coup against Sherman faction. What is your reading on this?
Well, it certainly does have the feel of a coup, doesn't it? When there are military vehicles surrounding the home of a high-ranking government official, when the newspapers that are believed to be owned or controlled by that official are suddenly closed down,
Right.
when people are suddenly purged or dismissed or reported as having been allowed to resign,
Right.
it has the feel of a coup. Yeah.
So it's a reminder of the old days under the regime, right?
I think it's not only a reminder in substance, I mean, we'll get to the substance, it's a reminder in style. It's got a kind of authoritarian, heavy, militaristic hand to it. It's a feel to it of being something that is not in tune with the modern times, not in tune with the spirit of democracy, certainly not transparent. It came out of nowhere. It does certainly feel like some internal seizure of power within the party, within the, I guess what you could call, in a certain way, the ruling party, though the ruling party in reality in Burma is the military. But substantively, people I respect view it as a regression for the transition. And it certainly seems to me to be a backward step for the transition in several respects. One, actually, style matters. So the authoritarian manner of this, tone of this, the military movements surrounding the house and so on, it harkens back to a very, much darker and frankly not that old period in the history of this country. It's already just a few years ago that this wasn't such a unfamiliar thing. Secondly, I mean, it is believed that Thuraj Shyman was what we call in the study of transitions a soft liner, more moderate, more flexible, more willing to negotiate with the democratic opposition. He seemed to have a good relationship with Aung San Suu Kyi, and they seemed to be able to work together. That was actually a hopeful sign for the future. So the fact that he would be in essence purged from the party leadership, and what one can only assume from the manner in which this has happened, that a more thorough purge of Speaker Shyman and his supporters may be in the offing, that this isn't finished, that they'll move in other ways. So it does appear to be the kind of moment we have seen in other political transitions when hardline elements of the regime assert themselves and try to gain an upper hand over more moderate and flexible elements. So I think it's worrisome in style, it's worrisome in substance, and it's worrisome because we don't know yet what else is going to happen.
Yes. But besides, this episode or incident just took place 3 months, barely 3 months before we are having general election.
Less than 3 months.
Less than 3 months. So how is going to have an impact on the election? And if the regime or hardliners believe in themselves that they're going to win again in the election, or how are they going to perform in the election? Because of there has been a backlash, there has been a backslide, and there's a very serious consequences because of the removal of House Speaker from the top party post. And I mean, this election is supposed to be free and fair, but is there fear that there will be a repeat of the 2010, that the regime and government and some elements are going to rig the election again and some status will remain?
Well, I think there should always have been concern about the freedom and fairness of the November 2015 elections.
Right.
There was not then, a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago or 4 months ago, any guarantee, and there isn't today in the wake of this kind of mini coup against Shwe Man, any guarantee that the elections were going to be free and fair. But I think the logic of what is happening now may underscore the threat to electoral integrity, and let me explain why. Shwe Man was a more flexible and moderate element of the political establishment. He was more willing to work with Suu Kyi and the NLD and democratic elements. I mean, who can look into his heart and know what he, how deep are his convictions in favor of kind of moving in a democratic direction? Right. You have to judge people by their behavior, but the behavior gave some hope to more democratic elements and certainly hope to Aung San Suu Kyi that he was someone they could work with, and that if they weren't going to get to democracy through this partnership, that they'd be able to have someone that they might be able to work with to move the system further in a democratic direction. I think it's fairly obvious that this is what the people of Burma want. If the USDP has now jettisoned someone who's more flexible, more modern in a way, seeming somewhat more democratic, someone who could work more with the NLD, and is replacing him and other candidates that he was trying to favor with more rigid military figures, more hardline figures, people who in fact are only leaving the military now as we're sitting here, then I think it is reasonable to assume that these candidates are going to be less appealing to their constituencies than the USDP candidates that they're replacing. So the USDP, in staging this internal coup, if you want to call it that, is giving itself an electoral handicap. That is, it is making it more difficult for the USDP to win a larger number of seats. And so you could ask the question, why are they making it more difficult for themselves to have a reasonably good electoral performance? And the answer some people might pose is maybe they aren't concerned about how well they're going to appeal to the electorate because they think they have other means of securing victory at the polls than the way people actually cast their ballots on election day.
This reformist President Thein Sein and his group would like to extend in a second term, and I think probably they felt that they have no other choice but just to remove Shwe Man faction, and they felt that unity has been threatened not only in the USDP party but also within the military. So I think they have made this decision to move against Shuiman and Shuiman Khan. But my question again is that how it's going to have a effect on Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, who seems to forge an alliance with Thuraj Shuiman.
Well, obviously it complicates her situation.
Right.
Okay. Because she has lost a partner, potentially, from within the regime. As Margaret Thatcher used to say about Mikhail Gorbachev, her famous line about Gorbachev, as Gorbachev was engaging in political reform and the Cold War was winding down, Margaret Thatcher said, you know, I rather like Mr. Gorbachev. He's someone we can do business with. She wasn't abandoning her principles.
No.
She wasn't saying, I love moderate communists. She was saying, here's a pragmatic guy. He's flexible. I may not agree with everything he has done or is doing now, but we can do business with him. And I know if I strike a deal with him, he'll deliver on it. I have a hunch that Aung San Suu Kyi has had that kind of relationship with Shwe Man. And so now, you know, that is interrupted. And at the same time, the irony of this dramatic political development, and I do think that analysts of the Burmese transition will look back on what is happening now and what may be happening in the days ahead, because we don't know how far this is going to go and where it will stop. Analysts will look back on this as probably one of the more important political developments during the Burmese political transition period. But the irony is it may, in the context of the election, make the USDP even less competitive, even less appealing to the public.
Unless they're going to rig the boat and steal everything and remain in status quo.
Well,
right?
that is the alternative. But if there's not large-scale electoral fraud, it may mean that the NLD wins even a larger scale victory than it might have before. If there is large-scale electoral fraud, it will rob the regime and President Thein Sein of the domestic and international legitimacy they're looking for to have this transition move forward and be accepted. So I think this is frankly a very high-stakes gamble by the regime.
So how is it Aung San Suu Kyi still remain very popular, and but Constitution is not going to amend it. It is Thuraj Shuiman was the one who favored to amend Constitution. This is one of the key points also, I think, the military and all guards, including a former dictator, Senior General Than Shwe, they are very worried about this Constitution amendment. This is their key, they want to hold it. And Shuiman was the one, is the black sheep that who wanted to change, amend the Constitution in favor of the Aung San Suu Kyi. These are I think, the key issues that finally, as a result, led the other hardliners from military to make a decision to remove and demote or stage internal coup against Shuiman. So with this constitution, an election is coming, and Aung San Suu Kyi, we still think or believe that she is going to contest, our party is going to contest in the election. How is going to play it out? I mean, this landscape in 2016 is going to be very massive.
Well, I'll tell you one scenario that is almost funny in its irony, and that is assume that Shwe Man is marginalized and maybe even expelled from the USDP. Assume maybe they'll find a way to strip him not only of his speakership but even of his membership in this parliament. Huh?
Maybe some criminal charges against him and his family.
Yes, but if they do that, they make a martyr out of him.
Yeah.
They may actually make him stronger.
Stronger.
And, you know, in the wake of the election, unless they're going to prosecute him, there's nothing to prevent him from being elected president.
That's right.
That's the irony of
That's
it.
irony.
But they're not going to achieve very much in terms of the balance of power in 2016 by going after one individual, because if the NLD, you know, wins the elections, probably in alliance with some of the ethnic minority parties, then they can elect somebody else as president. Maybe not Choi Man, not Aung San Suu Kyi, but possibly somebody else, you know, who might perform some of the same functions of Choi Man. That is, perhaps who's at one time been in the regime, or perhaps served as a minister in the regime, but, you know, is now outside the regime. Or they can elect anybody in parliament. I mean, if they have the numbers, you know, the Constitution does not require the commander-in-chief of the military to sign a letter saying, I approve of who's been elected president of the country.